And now, for our special surprise guest star, the man the establishment want to hang, and they will if we don't stop them, best known to me as a friend of my auntie, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
Those that are looking out of the windows up there, hello, how you doing? All those on the balconies all around, and anyone that's following it on social media on Facebook, I hope the sound holds better up this time than it did last time. Thank you all for coming today. This is the 40th campaign event we've done since this campaign began towards the end of July. And this fire truck, this wonderful fire truck, has been there in the wind, in the rain, all over the country. Only on Thursday, 2 days ago, we had a massive rally in the centre of Stoke-on-Trent with this same fire truck. And I want to say a huge thank you to all our friends in the Fire Brigade Union for affiliating to the party, all the support they've given, and all the work that firefighters do day in, day out to keep us all safe. And make sure that the fire service is properly funded, and also make sure that flood protection duties become a statutory obligation on the fire service so they get the funding they need to deal with the very difficult issues they dealt with so brilliantly last winter. Can we hear it for the firefighters? And you've heard all the speakers today. You've heard people speaking on behalf of WASPI, you've heard the health service, you've heard local councillors, you've heard anti-racist campaigns, you've heard a whole range of people, all coming together because they want to achieve something together. What our campaign is about is bringing together people with hopes, with ideas, with ambitions for all of us, not just for themselves. It's about uniting people as to the kind of world, kind of society, and kind of politics that we want to take us there. You've all come here today with views, I'm sure, on what you want to see, ambitions of what you want for yourselves, your family, your friends, your community, and everybody else, but a realization that when you bring together that collective strength and that collective wisdom, things do change. A year ago, just over a year ago, when the issue of the leadership of the Labour Party came up and we decided we would try and contest it, and I'm glad we did, we then had that amazing mandate. And people say, well, what's changed since then? I tell you this, just a couple of things. First of all, last summer, the Labour Party in Parliament was abstaining on a welfare reform bill that was going to take £12 billion out of the pockets of the most desperate people in our society. I am not abstaining when poor people are having money ripped out of their pockets by a Tory government. And we are not going into the plain culture of those people that quite legitimately apply for DWP support. And actually, I don't even like using the word welfare. As far as I'm concerned, it should be called social security. The security for all of us. And just over a year ago, we as a party, whilst we had many very good things in that election manifesto, there was a problem. And the problem was that we were supporting the continuation of the pay freeze in the public sector, which in reality was a pay cut. We were offering up further cuts in crucial services, and we weren't fully understanding the terrible cuts that have taken place, particularly in local government over the last 6 years. And so, the first thing we did was to appoint John McDonnell as the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, and the first thing John did was to make it quite clear that the policy of austerity, the policy of cutting back on public spending, the policy of rolling back the performance of the state in people's lives, in health and housing and education, was at an end. So far as we're concerned, austerity is a political choice made by the right, who are trying to say that the banking crisis of 2008 was caused by too much public expenditure, and that by a process of austerity, somehow or other, you deal with it. 6 years of austerity have brought us what? Greater inequality, greater levels of poverty, longer housing waiting lists, more overcrowding in the schools, greater indebtedness in our National Health Service, and too many people working in insecure jobs on 0 hours contracts, as Ian so brilliantly pointed out in his speech. There is a different and alternative way of doing things. There's a different and alternative way of doing our politics. So just as much as we disagree with top-down, trickle-down economics, we also disagree with top-down, hand-me-down politics that where policies are decided at the top and the rest have to like it or lump it. Let's do it all the other way round. And so I want to say a big thank you to everyone in Thanet for all the work they've done over the past years. I was here in the general election campaign, campaigning and knocking on doors, and I was so pleased when, whilst we didn't win the general election seats in Thanet, we did win that fantastic by-election in Newington when Karen Constantine got elected. I was so delighted by that, because it shows that when you offer a real alternative, when you offer an alternative of inclusion, you don't go down the road of blaming the nearest minority for the problems of everybody and everything else. Instead, you bring people together. There is a resonance. That is what the Labour movement is about. That is what these community events are about. That is what does change politics, does give hope, does give opportunity, and ultimately the whole society is better off for it. That is what is so strong about this united movement here in Thanet. So if you're concerned about unemployment rates of 7% in this area when the national rate is 4%, if you're concerned about the difference in income, the average income, weekly income across the South East for people in work is £550. In Thanet, it's £400. You go through a whole list and you find lower wages, less job opportunities, less economic development in the area. The solution isn't to blame somebody because they live in Thanet and are doing their best and making the best of their lives and trying to make the community better. It's instead to say to our government, say to our party, and say to the policies that we need, the way forward is to invest in a growing economy, invest in young people, invest in health, invest in opportunities. And so John McDonnell has pointed out that a National Investment Bank of £500 billion nationally would help all parts of this country. They've got to be helped fairly, they've got to be helped equally, because some parts of the country, East Midlands and the North East in particular, have often been starved of investment, and this whole area of East Kent has also suffered high unemployment, low wages, and all the difficulties that go with that. So that investment can do an awful lot of things. That investment can bring better communications, not just rail, also broadband. That investment can be investment in housing, which is so absolutely crucial, and I'll come back to that in a moment. That investment can also be in a digital economy, but also be in sustainable green energy jobs. You look down there, you see that massive wind farm. See the jobs that can be created if we had a proper system of feed-in tariffs to encourage, not penalise people for trying to generate their own electricity, or communities trying to generate their own electricity. So it's about the kind of society that we want to live in. Let's just take a couple of examples which you've heard some stuff about today. Take housing, for example. We live in a country which is one of the top 5 richest in the world. We live in a country where we have a tradition of a national health service. We have a tradition of a welfare state. We have a tradition of the idea that there should be a safety net for all of us. But I see massive holes in that safety net, and I see massive inequality. Is a society happy if a minority can afford to buy a Ferrari and a Maserati or a McLaren and drive slowly past those who are sleeping on the street because there's nowhere for them to live? Is that a comfortable society to be in? And is it good that so many of our children are growing up in households where sadly the parents haven't got jobs, sadly they cannot get a council house because there aren't enough available or enough have been built, so are living in short-term rented, 6-month or short-old tenancies in the private rented sector, sometimes, sadly too often, in appalling conditions, and then the tenancy is up after 6 months, they have to move on, and those children have to move on with it to yet another school, yet another community, yet another attempt to make friends and fit in with everybody else. Surely to goodness, we owe it to that whole generation of children at the moment living in insecure housing to build the council housing, to give the lifetime tenancies, to give them the security they need. To give them the security they need in order to be able to develop themselves so well at school. Why is it that we have nearly 1 million people working when they don't know what their income is going to be from one week to the other because they're on a 0 hours contract? They don't know if the employer is going to ring them up and offer them a job. Sometimes the employer calls and says, yeah, I really do need you today. Can you make your way down to the shop, the call centre, the factory, the office, whatever it happens to be? And then they're on the bus going down there and they get another call saying, sorry, I made a mistake, I don't need you today, go back home again. Is it right that you try and live, bring up a family when you don't even know what your income's going to be? You have no security of what that employment should be. And then if you think these things are isolated, they're not. Take the example of Shirebrook in Nottinghamshire. Shirebrook was a colliery. Shirebrook was a coal mine. Shirebrook had a strong community, a strong trade union in the National Union of Mine Workers, and a very efficient place it was too. Thatcher came along intent on destroying manufacturing industry in this country and destroying the trade unions that helped to protect so many people. Then look there now to Shirebrook. What do you find there? A Sports Direct warehouse, where those working in it are employed by an agency employing them. And even an all-party select committee in Parliament came to a unanimous agreement that the place was disgraceful, the treatment was disgusting, the denial of wages was appalling, the safety of workers in there having to rely on an ambulance service and a fire service to turn up and protect them from the dangerous conditions had to change. And as a result of that and the work of Unite the Union, £1 million is now being repaid in unpaid wages to those people in Sport Direct. I don't think this spiv economics culture is unique to Sport Direct. Look at the RBS stores that have been closed all over the country, the jobs that have been lost, the supply chain jobs that have been lost, whilst the owner, conveniently living in a tax haven in Monaco, jets in and out to make the decisions about whether the shops should stay or the shops should go, whether the jobs should stay or the jobs should go. Can't we call time on the spiv economy in Britain? Can't we call time on the idea that you deregulate endlessly in order to create growth, when in reality you create inequality, misery, poverty and insecurity at the other end of it? And so sound economy. It is about a living wage. It is about giving real opportunities to all these brilliant young people. Go to school, learn as much as they can, try and get into college, learn as much as they can. Yet they've lost the educational maintenance allowance that helped so many working class youngsters go through college and ultimately get into university. Then you see college places being cut, and then you see apprenticeships, some of which are absolutely brilliant in some companies, some of which are really just an excuse to exploit young people's goodwill and pay them very little. I want to see proper apprenticeships, an end to the youth rate of minimum wage, an end to the youth rate on the apprenticeship wage, and instead a proper living wage for everyone in work. And you know what? When you pay working people more, they spend it and the economy grows. When you give tax relief to the very rich, what do? They put it in a tax haven somewhere else, which is of no benefit to the rest of the economy. So it is about chasing down those tax havens and what goes with it. But it's also about giving opportunities to young people. So decent apprenticeships, reasonable levels of pay, and then when they go to university, want to achieve so much. For the first time this year, for the first time for many years, the proportion of working class students getting into university has gone down, and it looks like it's going to continue to go down. When you lift the cap on fees, when you expect students to graduate with debts of £50,000, it's a bit of a deterrent. And then people say, well, why should we subsidise the education of others? I simply say this. When I get on a train, I want to know it's been well made and well maintained. I want to know the person who designed that train knew what they were doing. When I get on a plane, I want to know the pilot is qualified, the maintenance engineers are qualified, and they've done the job properly. When you cross a road, you want to know that the person who maintained the traffic lights did the job properly and knew what they were doing. All of those people studied, educated, and became qualified. Yes, to some extent for themselves, but in reality, we all benefit from a well-qualified, well-trained society. We all benefit from a good doctor, or a good nurse, or a good teacher. It's all about whether you want to invest in society as a whole or not. And so we're suggesting a national education service that has the idea that education is for all of us, is a right for all of us, and should not be rationed as a privilege for those that can afford it, either for children trying to get a preschool place beyond 15 hours a week, or for students wanting to go to university, or for adults who want to return to education, maybe on evening classes, maybe part-time, but it's part of the adult education that's so important. And strengthen local authorities' role in education as the family of education, rather than set up every secondary school as a free school or an academy to compete with the school down the road and see if they can get away with lower wages or worse working conditions for the teachers or anybody else working within it. But life is about developing an economy, of course. Life is about making sure people get jobs and housing, of course. Life is about all of those things. But it's also about all our cultural endeavours and ability.